What's going on, guys? It's Brandon back here again today for another season video. 2020-21. This is one of those days where I've just woken up. I'm going to school in about an hour from now, so let's get it over with. 2020-21 was a unique year because it was the last shortened season we've ever had. Since the season that was prior, the 2019-20, it paused in mid-March. Didn't resume until August with the playoffs. The playoffs went all the way to October, so we had another 3-4 month break in between. So that meant we got the season started up in January, mid-January at that. So we had a 56-game schedule, and this would set the schedule back for years. It wasn't until this year, I believe, that we've truly got the final back to where it was supposed to be. And sorry about that. I might be one of the only houses with landline phones left, and I'm still hearing that. Yes, the last season the season gets started late in January, and it screws up the NHL until about 2022-23. That's when the final, kind of, sort of, almost is back. This year, I'd say the final's fully back to where it was supposed to be. So I think we finally have caught up to the after effects of COVID, because not only did it do that, but the salary cap stayed still. Teams weren't making money because they couldn't have fans in attendance in most places. So you couldn't make money, so the salary cap doesn't go up. Therefore, teams like Toronto are screwed. So teams are making trades to try to get under the cap, try to not have to worry about the cap, and you see some both poor and wise decisions being made. In the divisions were also all changed. We had the West Division, the North Division, the Central Division, and the East Division because of travel, to limit travel. And Canadian teams couldn't be in the United States and vice versa, so they went with their own division until literally the Final Four. In the West Division, so West and North were considered the Western Conference. East and Central were considered the Eastern Conference, which was weird because that was the only time in my lifetime the Hawks have been in the Eastern Conference. Colorado wins the President's Trophy at 39-13-4, 82 points. Vegas also goes 40-14-2 with 82 points. So both of them, fantastic seasons. They were the two best teams in the league, and people knew it. Minnesota, 35-16-5, 78 points, or 75. I'm not sure which one that is. St. Louis, 75. St. Louis, 27-20-9, 63 points. Out of the playoffs. So we had 24 teams make the playoffs last time. We're back to 16. And so there's a lot of teams that fall out of the playoffs, but no new teams get into the playoffs. Arizona, 24-26-6, 54 points. The LA Kings, 21-28-7, 49 points. San Jose, 21-28-7, 49 points as well, same exact record. 17-30-9 is for Anaheim Ducks, 43 points. Another thing to point out, this would be the last time you see Arizona in the West or Pacific Division, because Seattle comes in next year. So this is the last time you'll also only see 31 teams on the board. In the North Division, Toronto runs away with it at 35-14-7. Edmonton goes 35-19-2, 72 points. Toronto had 77. Winnipeg 30-23-3, 63 points. The lowly Montreal Canadiens, who I expected to do a lot better during the regular season this year. I remember I had them finishing second in the division, and then I had Calgary and Vancouver. 39 points for Montreal, who goes 24-21-11. This means they only won 24 of 56 games. They shouldn't have been anywhere near the playoffs. And that's where the narrative came in, and the North Division sucks. Calgary, 26-27-3. That's for 35 points. Ottawa, 23-28-5, 51 points. And Vancouver, 1 year after finally getting into the playoffs, 23-29-4, 50 points. They're back out. So you have the Coyotes, you have the Flames, you have the Canucks all in the West that are all out of the playoffs. In the Central Division, this was a loaded Central Division, and I knew the Hawks had no chance in it. It was also before this season that Stan Bowman came out and said, we're doing a rebuild. So we're like, okay, it's going to suck from here on out. And then they actually had a pretty good season. 36-12-8 for the Hurricanes at 80 points. Florida, 37-14-5, 79 points. First time they have back-to-back playoff seasons since 96-97, and the only time that they did that. Tampa Bay, 36-17-3, 75 points. Back-to-back champions, yes. Nashville, 31-23-2, 64 points. What I remember about that is Nashville had a horrendous start to the season, and Chicago had a really good start. and they kind of swapped spots. Chicago had such a Florida, Carolina, Tampa Bay heavy-ended schedule. They cruised to the beginning because there was a lot of Detroit, a lot of Columbus. They played Dallas a bunch. Other than the first 3 games, which they got killed by Tampa, and then Florida, I believe they led into 15 goals in those 3 games. After that, they got their stuff together, and they actually had a pretty good season. Dallas finishes out of the playoffs after going to the final, 23, 19, and 14, 60 points. Chicago falls out of the playoffs at 24, 25, and 7, 55 points. And if they were able, the problem was, although they couldn't beat Tampa, they couldn't beat Florida. They actually won a couple games against Florida. I believe they beat Tampa once. Carolina, I believe they beat maybe once or twice, just like maybe 3 times like Florida. Dallas, they were fine against. Detroit, they were fine against. Columbus, they were fine against. Against Nashville, they couldn't win. I'm pretty sure they went 0-8 against Nashville this season. And if they win a few of those games, we're probably talking about them getting eliminated by Carolina in the first round. But nonetheless, Detroit 19, 27, and 10, 48 points. Columbus 18, 26, and 12, 48 points. The wheels fall off the bus. They are no longer a playoff team, and they fall out of the playoffs. In the East Division, surprisingly, Pittsburgh wins 37, 16, and 3, 77 points. First time Washington hasn't won their division in millennia. 36, 15, and 5, 77 points, although, so they had the same record, they had the same amount of points as the Penguins, but the Penguins had more regulation wins. Boston, 33, 16, and 7, 73 points. The Islanders, 32, 17, and 7, 71 points. Falling out of the playoffs, the Rangers at 27, 23, and 6, 60 points. I don't know why I said 39 points. Montreal had 59 points, Calgary had 55, Ottawa 51, Vancouver 50. I wrote that horribly. I don't know why it's 39. But Philadelphia 25, 23, and 8. They fall out of the playoffs, 58 points. This is the last season you'll see Philadelphia go back and forth every single year. It started in 2012. It ends in 2021. 10 seasons they go back and forth in and out of the playoffs. From now on, they'll just be out of the playoffs. New Jersey, 19, 30, and 7, 49 points. Buffalo, 15, 34, and 7, 37 points. They win the first overall pick, who is Owen Power. And Seattle, of course, would go number 2 and select Matty Beniers, although that's not on the board. In the playoffs, so the way it was set up, N1 played N4, for example, in the North, so Toronto played Montreal, N2 played N3, Edmonton played Winnipeg. So we'll start with that in the Western Conference. N1 Toronto versus N4 Montreal. We all know how this one went. And what's crazy is I saw this coming. When NHL releases their bracket every year, I had Montreal in 6 because I said Toronto's not winning. I looked at Montreal and I looked at Toronto. I'm like, yeah, but Toronto's not winning. And they went up 3-1. I'm like, okay. And then they lose games 5 and 6, even though Tavares goes down, even though Muzzin goes down. And I'm like, there's no way this is about to happen. I remember I was at a friend's house watching the game for Game 7. And I was going nuts when Montreal won the game. It was great. N2 Edmonton versus N3 Winnipeg. Winnipeg sweeps Edmonton in 4, even though I think 3 of those games went to overtime, and I believe Edmonton blew a 4-1 lead, if I remember correctly. So, although it was a very close series, the narratives about Edmonton are getting louder. They lost to Chicago, now they lost to Winnipeg in 4. While West 1 Colorado beats West 4 St. Louis in 4 straight. That wasn't any contention. West 2 Vegas beats West 3 Minnesota in 7. That was a very good series, a very hard-fought series, and it showed that Minnesota was on the rise. And but it showed again that Minnesota couldn't get it done once again. In the East, E1 Pittsburgh loses to E4 the Islanders in 6 games. That was something I had predicted, so I was very proud of myself for that. I had nailed every pick except Edmonton at that point. Islanders, they don't sweep Pittsburgh this time. They win in 6 games. Washington and Boston, I got this one right as well. E2 Washington versus E3 Boston. Boston wins that series in 5. And it kind of slammed the door shut. Pittsburgh and Washington's windows really ended there, I think. I'd even argue that they've ended the previous season. But I guess it's 3 years out when you really start getting close. So if Tampa loses in the first round this year, you can argue their window is kind of shut. But Yeah, Boston beating Washington kind of signaled the end of times, as well as the Islanders beating the Penguins. Central Team 1, Carolina beats Central Team 4, Nashville in 6. Nashville made it hard. A lot of those games went to overtime, and Nashville was pretty good at home. Unfortunately, that Game 6 win, they could not get it done in overtime. I believe the last 4 games went to overtime. C2, Florida, and C3, Tampa Bay. First time these teams ever met in the Battle of Florida. Tampa Bay wins the series in 6 games. So in the second round, N4 Montreal beats N3 Winnipeg in 4. So they've now won 7 games in a row. And this is Carey Price's last chance. People are getting an aura of at this point. West 1 Colorado loses to West 2 Vegas. And I was pretty happy about this as a Vegas fan, because I thought, okay, we just got to play Montreal and we're in the final. We're chilling. And I'm pretty sure I had Vegas winning the cup over Tampa in my bracket this season. So, or no, I had Vegas over Carolina in my bracket this season. So overall, I was pretty happy. Colorado won the first 2 games, I remember, and then Vegas stormed back and won the next 4. So I was pretty amped up. And then in the second round over there, the East 4 Islanders beat East 3 Boston in 6. So the Islanders go back to the conference finals for the second year in a row. And Central Team 1 Carolina loses to Central Team 3 Tampa in 5. So now Tampa's back in the conference final. We get a repeat and a rematch of the last seasons, which the Tampa won in 6. And in the West, we had Vegas and Montreal, and I was very confident, especially after Game 1. Vegas loses the series in 6. You know what the worst part is? I was on vacation for that entire series. Games 1 and 2 were played when I was in Arizona. Games 3 and 4 were played when I was in Vegas. So I remember being at a casino, watching the game. I remember seeing Fleury go behind the net in Game 3 and take the puck behind the net. Josh Anderson comes right up and ties the game, and then he gets the winner. And I had my hands on my head like this. My jaw was on the floor. And I said, oh my gosh. And then Game 4, Nick Waugh gets the OT winner. Game 5, Montreal just controlled. And Game 6, Arturi Lehkonen gets the winner. I have never been so mad at Vegas in my entire life than what happened there. They blew the chance to go to the final. In the East, Tampa beats the Islanders. C3 beats E4 once again, but this time it's in 7. And I was really rooting for the Islanders. I really wanted an underdog story, and I didn't want to see Tampa win again. So when the Islanders won that Game 6, I got so happy, and then Game 7, no. In the final, it's N4 Montreal versus C3 Tampa Bay. What I was angry about most was that it was 2 Eastern teams facing each other, so Montreal technically won the Western Conference, and I thought, that ain't right. Game 1, Tampa Bay wins 5-1. Yeah, I didn't give Montreal much of a chance, and they didn't deserve it. Game 2, Tampa wins 3-1. The series shifts to Montreal, where Tampa wins 6-3. And I thought, we're getting our first sweep in the Stanley Cup Final since 1998. Game 4, Montreal wins 3-2 in overtime off a Josh Anderson winner, and that was a lucky one. Tampa Bay comes home and they win 1-0. Ross Colton with the winner in Game 5. They win their back-to-back Stanley Cups and their 3rd Stanley Cup. Kucherov, 23 games played, 8 goals, 24 assists, 32 points. Vasilevsky goes 16-7 with a 1.9 goals against average, .937 save percentage, and 5 shutouts. Vasilevsky wins the Conn Smythe this year, which I can't argue against, but I can't help but feel that Kucherov was robbed both years. He led the playoffs in points both years. He was way over a point a game both years. And I feel like he didn't get any credit, even though he's a guaranteed pretty much Hall of Famer. He's got 2 Art Ross trophies, a Hart Trophy, all that jazz. But a Conn Smythe could have really added to that aura that he has. Award winners. Art Ross goes to who else but Connor McDavid, who had 33 goals, 72 assists, and 105 points in 56 games. He was on a record-setting pace that season, and he only continued to up that in the near future. Masterton goes to Oscar Lindblom with the Philadelphia Flyers because he beat cancer. Calder goes to a guy named Kirill the Thrill Kaprizov, still around. Conn Smythe, Andre Vasilevsky of the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Selke goes to Alexander Barkov of the Florida Panthers. So now you got 3 guys winning it. You've seen Bergeron, you've seen Kopitar, and you've seen Barkov. Those are the big 3 for the Selke. What was the last time we didn't see that? I think it might have been Jonathan Toews in 2013 was the last time we didn't see one of them win the Selke. The Hart, Connor McDavid of Edmonton Oilers, because who else? The Jack Adams goes to Rod Brindamore of the Carolina Hurricanes. He was on the board much earlier in the series, but not for coaching, as a player. The Norris goes to Adam Fox of the New York Rangers. The Clancy goes to Pekka Rinne of the Nashville Predators, this would be his final season. The Lady Byng goes to Jacob Slavin of the Carolina Hurricanes. The Ted Lindsay Award goes to Connor McDavid of the Edmonton Oilers, because who else? The Messier goes to Patrice Bergeron of the Boston Bruins. The Rocket goes to Austin Matthews of the Toronto Maple Leafs, who we're going to start seeing prominently now. He has 41 goals. The Vezina goes to Marc-Andre Fleury of the Vegas Golden Knights, 26-10-0 record with 6 shutouts, 928 save percentage, and a 1.98 goals against. So what does Vegas do to reward him? They trade him to Chicago. In one of the most baffling days of my life. The Jennings goes to Marc-Andre Fleury and Robin Lehner of the Vegas Golden Knights, 2 Blackhawk goalies. Yeah, that's weird to say. In terms of free agents, there were a lot. All-Stars. First team All-Stars, left winger Brad Marchand, center Connor McDavid, right wing Mitch Marner. On defense, Cale Makar and Adam Fox. In net, who else but Andrei Vasilevsky? Except you realize Marc-Andre Fleury won the Vezina as the best goalie, so why is Vasilevsky the first team All-Star? The second team, left wing goes to Jonathan Huberdeau, center Austin Matthews, right wing Mikko Rantanen, defense Victor Hedman and Dougie Hamilton, in net Marc-Andre Fleury. Because if he's not making the first team, he better be making the second team as the Vezina winner. The rookie team goes to Jason Robertson, Josh Norris, Kirill Kaprizov, Ty Smith and Keandre Miller, along with Alex Nedeljkovic in net. A lot of rookies were prominent this year. You could have honestly made 2 rookie teams with how many guys were prominent. The Hawks had 4 rookies of their own in Pius Suter, Brandon Hagel, Philip Kurashev, and Kevin Lankinen. And you could have already made an argument early in the season that Lankinen was going to win the Calder. But Nedeljkovic eventually takes that spot on the panel. He doesn't win the Calder, but still. Ty Smith's an interesting one considering he's not in the league anymore. Keandre Miller, we all know how good he is. Kirill Kaprizov, 100-point guy. Josh Norris, injury-riddled but good. And Jason Robertson, 100-point guy. In terms of free agents, a lot of free agents this year because you had the guys who signed 1-year, 2-year deals in years previous, but also the guys who had signed deals a long time ago made sure their deal ended in 2020-21 because that's when the next CBA was up. However, because COVID happened, the cap doesn't go up, the CBA doesn't get extended, so these guys looking for big raises can't really end up get big raises. So you have a lot of free agents on the board, and we're going to go through them all, and then we'll go through trades. Wayne Simmons goes to Toronto, Bobby Ryan goes to Detroit, Radko Gudas goes to Florida, John Hayden goes to Arizona, Tyler Pitlick to Arizona, John Merrill to Detroit, Carter Verhaeghe to Florida, Henrik Lundqvist to Washington, who he never really played for, Kyle Turris to Edmonton, Cam Talbot to Minnesota, Kevin Rooney to the Rangers, Braden Holtby to Vancouver, Colin Blackwell to the Rangers, Keith Kincaid to the Rangers, Anton Forsberg to Edmonton, Alex Wenberg to Florida, Mark Jankowski to Pittsburgh, Evan Rodriguez to Pittsburgh, Derek Grant to Anaheim, Mark Borowiecki to Nashville, Kevin Shattenkirk to Anaheim, Tobias Reeder to Buffalo, Matt Benning to Nashville. Who is that down there? I need to actually bend down to see this. Justin Schultz to Washington, Petrovic to Calgary, Jack Johnson to the Rangers. I'm like, who the heck is that? Kiefer Sherwood to Colorado, Logan Shaw to Ottawa, Matt Irwin to Buffalo, Jacob Markstrom to Calgary. That was a big one. Lomberg goes to Florida. Jeff Gillies? It goes to St. Louis. TJ Brody goes to Toronto. Nick Cousins goes to Nashville. Torrey Krug to St. Louis. That was big at the time. Brandon Davidson to Buffalo. Now, what the heck did I write here? That there's a Y. No. No. I actually have no clue what I wrote there. Tanev to Calgary. Larson to Arizona. That's Johan Larson. Mark Pysyk to Dallas. Nate Thompson to Winnipeg. Mikko Koivu to Columbus for about 5 games. Troy Stetcher to Detroit. Tyson Barrie to Edmonton. Craig Smith goes to Boston. Thomas Greiss to Detroit. Thomas Yurko to Vegas. Andy Walensky to Anaheim. Freddie Gaudreau to Pittsburgh. Vinny Laterra to Anaheim. Corey Crawford to New Jersey, whom he would never play for as he retired. Derek Forbort to Winnipeg. Drake Caggiula to Arizona. Connor Sherry to Washington. Corey Schneider to the Islanders. Ben Hutton to Anaheim, Brent Ritchie to Calgary, Madison Bowie to Chicago, Nikita Gusev to Florida, Michael Frolik to Montreal, Anthony Duclair to Florida, Vlad Nemestikov to Detroit, Scott Wedgwood to New Jersey, Marco Dondo to Winnipeg, Eric Holla to Nashville, Slater Cuckoo to Edmonton, Carl Soderberg to Chicago, Taylor Gabriel to San Jose, Dominic Cahoon to Edmonton, Kyle Clifford to St. Louis. Taylor Hall goes to Buffalo, and what was iconic about that is that he said, I want to go somewhere where we're going to win. He can't have picked a worse place to go than the Buffalo Sabres. He signs a 1-year, $9 million deal, I believe. And, wow, what a go-around he had. Buffalo finishes last in the league. And they still haven't made the playoffs since 2011. Jimmy Vesey to Toronto, Michael Hutchinson to Toronto, Corey Perry to Montreal, Andreas Athanasiou to LA, Alex Galchenyuk to Ottawa, Matthias Janmark to Chicago, who played pretty well. Toffoli to Montreal, Josh Levo to Calgary, Chara goes to Washington, and that was a weird one. Vatanen to the Devils, Brassard to the Coyotes, Kulikov to the Devils as well, Dominic Simone to Calgary, Eric Gustafsson to Philadelphia, Brad Richardson to Nashville, whom he eliminated the previous year, Lucas Wallmark to Chicago, Alex Pietrangelo to Vegas, that was a big one, Scott Wilson to Florida, Joachim Nordstrom to Calgary, Riley Sheahan to Buffalo, Michael Del Zotto to Columbus, Mike Hoffman to St. Louis, Julian Gauthier to Arizona, Cody Ceci to Pittsburgh, Evgeny Dadonov to Ottawa, Austin Czarnik to the Islanders, Patrick Marleau back to San Jose, Matt Nieto to San Jose, Aaron Dell to Toronto, Joe Thornton to Toronto, Travis Hamonic to Vancouver, Craig Anderson to Washington, Kevin Connaughton to Florida, Devin Shore to Edmonton, Trevor Lewis to Winnipeg, Louis Domingue to Calgary, Travis Boyd to Toronto, Tony Nato to Washington, or Tony Nato to Winnipeg, Bogosian to Washington, Bogosian to Toronto, jeez. Tony Nato to Winnipeg, Bogosian to Toronto, Brad Hunt to Arizona, Trevor Van Riemsdyk goes to Washington, Jesper Foss to Carolina, Cody Eakin to Buffalo, Vinny Hinostroza to Florida, and I still am trying to figure out, this is the one guy, he goes to Columbus, and B, it looks like a B, there's a Y in there, Gavin Bayreuther goes to Columbus. Yeah, I need to learn how to write better. But, a lot of free agent signings. But top 6, bottom 6, stars, everything. In terms of trades, not as many overall in years previous because of the shortened season and the cap constraints. We'll start with this. October 6, 2020. Columbus gets Max Domi and a third-round pick in exchange for Josh Anderson going to Montreal. Ottawa gets Matt Murray on October 7th for Jonathan Gruden and a second-round pick going to Pittsburgh because they had a guy named Tristan Jarry coming up. October 7th, Minnesota gets Nick Bonino, a second and a third for Luke Cunnin and a fourth going to Nashville. October 7th, LA gets Elias Anderson from the Rangers for LA gets Elias Anderson, the Rangers get a second-round pick. Anderson never could crack an NHL roster. Florida gets Marcus Nudavara on October 8th for Cliff Poo going to Columbus. Florida wins that trade. Ottawa gets Erica Branson on October 8th. Anaheim gets a fifth-round pick. New Jersey gets a Ryan Murray on the 8th. Columbus gets a fifth-round pick, so they're selling off everything, essentially. Winnipeg gets Paul Stastny, again, after being away for a year on October 9th. Vegas gets Carl Dahlstrom in a conditional fourth. October 10th, Ottawa gets Austin Watson. Nashville gets a fourth-round pick. October 10th, Colorado gets Brandon Saad and Dennis Gilbert for Nikita Zadorov and Anton Lindholm. Probably thinking, wow, the Hawks had Zadorov? Probably forgot about that. And he was not the player he is now. In terms of Brandon Saad, he plays one season in Colorado, and I really wanted them to win the Stanley Cup that year because of it. Sorry, I just got an email from school. I just wanted to check that. New Jersey gets Andreas Janssen on October 10th. Toronto gets Joey Anderson, who's now in the Chicago organization. The Islanders get A.J. Greer on October 11th for Kyle Burrows going to Colorado. Both of them jump ship a lot. October 12th, the Islanders kind of lose their mind as they get 2 seconds in exchange for Devin Taves going to Colorado. Vancouver on October 12th gets Nate Schmidt in exchange for a third-round pick going to Vegas. And then these are all picks, a trade, scroll all the way down. We don't get anything till December. Nashville gets Michael Carcone. Ottawa gets Zach Bagwood. So Carcone's still moving around. Ottawa gets Derek Stepan on December 26th. Arizona gets a second-round pick. Ottawa gets the contracts of Braden Coburn along with Cedric Paquette and a second-round pick. Tampa Bay gets Marian Gabourik's contract and Anders Nielsen's contract as well on December 27th. Minnesota gets Ian Cole on January 19th. Colorado gets Greg Pateryn. Then January 23rd, 2021, one of the most bizarre deals I've ever seen gets made. Patrick Laine goes to Columbus along with Jack Roslovic in exchange for Pierre-Luc Dubois and a third-round pick going to Winnipeg. Dubois did not stay in Winnipeg. Laine is no longer in Columbus. Jack Roslovic got traded at last year's deadline, and I have no clue what that third-round pick began. So in terms of that trade, you end up with nothing. Absolutely nothing. Anyway, February, Carolina gets Alex Galchenyuk and Cedric Paquette. Ottawa gets Ryan Dzingel. Then Toronto ends up with Alex Galchenyuk on February 15th for Yegor Korshkov and David Worevsky. Colorado ends up with Jonas Johansson for a 6th-round pick going to Buffalo on March 20th. Montreal on March 26th gets Eric Stahl for a 3rd and a 5th-round pick going to Buffalo. Because, by the way, he was in Buffalo. March 27th, LA gets Brendan Lemieux. The Rangers get a 4th-round pick. Ottawa gets Michael Amadio for Christian Wolanin for the LA Kings. March 29th. April 2nd, the Hawks get Vinny Hinostroza back for Brad Morrison going to Florida, and Hinostroza played very well with the Hawks, which made me think, why did they let him go in the first place, and why did they not re-sign him after the season, because he was a point a game after he got back. The Islanders, they get Travis Zajac and Kyle Palmieri for AJ Greer, Mason Jobst, a 1st, a conditional 3rd. Yeah. That was Zajac's last season, I believe. And then the Hawks, they decide we're all in. April 8th, they get Brett Connolly's contract, although he is playing. Didn't play for many games in Chicago. Henrik Borgstrom was a bust. Riley Stillman, bottom 2, 7th defenseman, and a 7th-round pick. Florida gets Lucas Wallmark and Lucas Carlson. I had high hopes for Lucas Carlson. He never really panned out at the NHL level. He gets a few games in here and there. Wallmark ended up in Europe the next year. April 9th, Toronto gets Riley Nash for a conditional 6th. April 9th, Colorado gets Patrick Nemeth for a 4th going to Detroit. For Patrick Nemeth is surprising. April 10th, Florida gets Brandon Montour for a 3rd-round pick going to Buffalo. So Montour goes there, Reinhart ends up there, and Buffalo got Poso also ends up there. So Buffalo guys just win championships, I guess, just not in Buffalo. April 10th, Colorado gets Devin Dubnyk for his last go-around, and Greg Pateryn and a 5th go to San Jose. Gotta love Greg Pateryn getting moved around. Franchise mode legend. 3-way trade takes place on April 10th. So Detroit gets David Savard, Columbus gets Brian Lashoff. Tampa Bay then acquires David Savard. Detroit gets a 4th-round pick. And then Tampa Bay ends up with Brian Lashoff. Columbus ends up with a 1st and a 3rd-round pick. April 11th, New Jersey trades Jonas Siegenthaler, or they get Jonas Siegenthaler. Washington gets a conditional 3rd-round pick. April 11th, Montreal gets John Merrill. The Red Wings get Hayden Verbeek and a 5th-round pick. April 11th, another 3-way deal. Nick Foligno's traded to San Jose for Stefan Noesen going to Columbus. We know that name very well. Toronto then gets Nick Foligno for a 4th going to San Jose, and then Toronto also ends up with Stefan Noesen. Columbus ends up with a 1st and a 4th-round pick. So Toronto ends up with Foligno and Nason, San Jose ends up with a 4th, and Columbus ends up with a 1st and a 4th. April 11th, Mike Riley goes to Boston for a 3rd-round pick to Ottawa. April 11th, Toronto gets David Riddick for a 3rd-round pick to Calgary, which I completely forgot happened. April 11th, the Islanders get Braden Coburn for a 7th-round pick to Ottawa. April 12th, Boston gets Taylor Hall and Curtis Lazar for Anders Bjork, who is in the I believe with the Hawks minor league team, and a 2nd-round pick going to Buffalo for Taylor Hall. Anders Bjork and a 2nd-round pick for Taylor Hall. Excellent job, Buffalo. April 12th, Pittsburgh gets Jeff Carter for a conditional 2nd and a 3rd, or just a conditional 2nd going to LA. April 12th, Chicago trades they get Adam Gaudette for Matthew Highmore going to Vancouver. I would have kept Highmore personally. April 12th, Tampa Bay gets Frederick Kleeson. San Jose gets Magnus Krona, who, if that name sounds familiar, he was just part of that Yaroslav Askarov trade. April 12th, Edmonton gets Dmitry Kulikov. New Jersey gets a conditional third. April 12th, Colorado gets Carl Soderberg. Chicago gets Josh Dickinson. Not the Dickinson we have. And Ryder Rolston, who's in the minor league team. April 12th, Montreal gets Eric Gustafson for a 7th round pick going to Philadelphia. He did not fit the system in Philadelphia. He seemed to only really work in Chicago. April 12th, Florida gets Sam Bennett in a 6th round pick. Calgary gets Emil Heinonen in a 2nd round pick. Florida is very happy with that trade. April 12th, another 3-way trade takes place. San Jose gets Matthias Janmark. Chicago gets Nick DeSimone. Vegas then gets Matthias Janmark. San Jose gets a 5th round pick. Vegas then gets a Nick DeSimone and a 5th round pick. Chicago gets a 2nd and a 3rd. So the Hawks get 2 picks for Janmark, who had a very good season with the Hawks at that point. He had a pretty good playoff, too. Toronto gets Ben Hutton on April 12th for a 5th round pick going to Anaheim. So Ben Hutton gets a 5th, yet some other people get a 7th. I don't know. April 12th, Erica Branson goes to Nashville for Brandon Fortunato and a 7th round pick going to Ottawa. April 12th, Toronto gets Antti Sumela. San Jose gets Alexander Barabanov. April 12th, Anaheim gets Hayden Fleury. Carolina gets Yanni Hakanpää and a 6th round pick. April 12th, Winnipeg gets Jordy Ben and Vancouver gets a 6th round pick. April 12th, Madison Bowie and a 5th go to Vancouver. Chicago gets a 4th. April 12th, Washington gets Michael Raffl. Philadelphia gets a 5th round pick. And April 12th, Washington gets Anthony Mantha. For Detroit gets Jacob Vrana, Richard Panik, a 1st and a 2nd. I don't know how to make of that for either team. After the season is over, we also have a couple trades. LA gets Victor Arvidsson. Nashville gets a 2nd and a 3rd on July 1st. July 12th, Edmonton gets Duncan Keith and Tim Soderlin. Chicago gets Caleb Jones and a conditional 3rd. I remember that deal very well. Carolina gets Dylan Wells. Edmonton gets future considerations on July 14th. July 15th, New Jersey gets Ryan Graves. Colorado gets Mikhail Maltsev and a 2nd round pick. July 16th, Detroit gets Nick Leddy. Islanders get Richard Panik and a 2nd round pick. July 17th, San Jose gets Aiden Hill and a 7th round pick. Arizona gets Joseph Coronar and a 2nd round pick. There used to be upside for Coronar, not so much anymore. July 17th, Vancouver gets Jason Dickinson. Dallas gets a 3rd round pick. July 17th, in preparation for the Seattle expansion draft, Toronto picks up Jared McCann. Pittsburgh gets Philip Hollander and a 7th round pick. I bet they wish they had Jared McCann. July 17th, Philadelphia gets Ryan Ellis for Philippe Myers and Nolan Patrick going to Nashville. Trade that did not work out for either team. July 17th, Nashville gets Cody Glass. Vegas gets Nolan Patrick. So that's a 3-way deal right there. July 17th, Vegas gets Brent Howden. New York gets the Rangers get Nick DeSimone and a 4th round pick. July 17th, the Rangers get Barclay Goodrow for a 7th round pick going to Tampa Bay. July 17th, Andrew Ladd, a 2nd round pick, and a conditional 2nd go to the Coyotes for future considerations going to the Islanders because of that horrible contract. July 22nd, Carolina, at the time we thought drank the stupid juice because they get Alex Nedeljkovic to Detroit. Jonathan Bernier and a 3rd go back Carolina's way. July 22nd, Shane Gostisbehere and a 2nd and a 7th end up in Arizona for future considerations going to Philly. Gostisbehere wasn't playing his best at the time. Arizona revived his career, but giving up all those assets for a player that was good was kind of crazy. In July 22nd, 2021, the first trade in Seattle Kraken history, Calgary gets Tyler Pitlick. Seattle gets a 4th round pick. That, of course, would be after the expansion draft, which we'll go over just like the Vegas one in the next video. So that's going to be all I have for you guys in this one. Overall, lots of transactions with the new CBA that ends up getting renewed up until 26-27, which is only now 2 seasons away. Last time you'll see 31 teams on the board. Last time you'll see weird divisions on the board as everything goes back to normal, except Arizona goes to the Central. And that's going to be all I have for you guys in this one. I want to thank you all so much for watching this video, and I shall see you all in the next one. Have a good one.